Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. A replacement has been found for Lucas Browne in Las Vegas on March the 28th on a Showtime card that's been headlined by Louis Neri. So Browne will now be facing the Russian Apti Davtaev, who is part of the Dmitry Salita stable. So he also promotes Otto Wallin as well. Wallin pulled out of this fight because of a foot injury. Well, that's what the press release says. So you can see here on screen, undefeated heavyweight prospect Apti Davtaev to face Lucas Browne, yada yada yada, and we'll get into this. So if you didn't know who Davtaev, because before he signed with Dmitry Salita, where he started to get a little bit of headlines and a little bit of buzz, relatively obscure heavyweight campaigning in Russia, out of the minds of most boxing fans, and it's a bit of a mystery how good he is, but he's fought a couple of times this year, and we'll come to that as well. But it says from Kirchaloy, Russia, Davtaev 20-0 and 1 draw, 19 KOs, has earned 90% knockout ratio with his aggressive style and devastating power. The athletic 30-year-old has remained active since moving his camp to the United States in 2017 after signing with Salita Promotions. He trains at Kronk Gym in Detroit, Michigan, under the tutelage of Sugar Hill Stewart, nephew of legendary Hall of Fame trainer Emanuel Stewart. So promoter Dmitry Salita says Otto suffered a minor injury and suspending training was the smart thing to do. He will be back in the ring in no time. Fortunately, Apti was in top shape and ready to go. He is a gifted heavyweight and he'll be on everyone's radar after March 28. And then it goes on to detail his last fight, which was just days ago on February 21 in Russia. He fought unbeaten John Napari, defeated him with a second round knockout. That was his second fight of the year, previously having fought Keith Barr. But I guess for a lot of people, they'll be asking, who is Apti Davtaev? Because he has been, relatively speaking, an obscure heavyweight who hasn't really been on most people's radar. He's only really come onto my radar more so because I get press releases that Dmitry Salita puts out. And he's had a bit of attention recently with his couple of fights that he's been in. They've put out press releases and I've covered them off on the channel. So I'm not going to say that I know this guy right down to the ground, but from what I have seen, he's a big power puncher, but obviously at 30 years old, 20-0, it's go time for him in the heavyweight division. So this is actually going to be a step-up fight for Apti Davtaev. We'll get to see him on TV. We'll get to see how good he really is, because I honestly don't know at this point. And at 30 years old and he's had 20 fights, it is time for a step-up. And in Lucas Browne, who's better than John Napari, he's an obscure heavyweight himself. He's better than Daniel Martz, who Apti Davtaev has fought before. He's better than Keith Barr, which was a fight in January that Davtaev had. So the Russian is coming into this with some actual form behind him. A couple of fights under the ledger for 2020 already. So it'll be 3 fights in 3 months. So effectively one continuous training camp. And I would pick Davtaev to beat Lucas Browne just because Lucas Browne is 40 years old and he is, in my view, over the hill. Dillian Whyte effectively retired Lucas Browne 2 years ago, but Lucas Browne just didn't really realise that. He's looked pretty dreadful in a lot of his fights since then. The Dave Allen one, he was stopped. There was the Kamil Sokolowski where he got, in my view, a relatively kind decision, a 6-rounder in which he was dropped, and apparently he won most of the rest of the rounds. Not really the sort of fight that I saw. I thought that was relatively competitive. At worst, a draw for me. But this is kind of last chance saloon in terms of a big fight, I believe, for Lucas Browne. He's spoken about coming over to Las Vegas. It'll be his first fight in America. It's a dream for him. But he hasn't really talked up that he's going to be beating his opponent, which was previously Otto Wallin, and now it's going to be an unheralded Russian. But I do think it's a better style matchup for Lucas Browne than the southpaw Otto Wallin, who I think would have picked him apart. And I did say in my previous video announcing that a replacement would need to be found after Wallin injured himself, that I thought it was going to be one of two guys, and Davtaev was one of those two guys, just because he's part of the Dmitry Salita stable. Similar record, and actually he can just be plugged in at a moment's notice, and clearly he's like the offer or whatever, and it's probably going to be a career high payday for Apti Davtaev, given the Showtime budget that it's going to be on television. So it's interesting for me, the sort of what's on the line for both of these guys in this fight, because if Lucas Browne loses and loses badly, which I think some people will expect to happen, that he could get knocked out here, then where does he really go? He's spoken about wanting to fight for another couple of years, and he's wanting to get paydays, the biggest paydays possible, but a brutal loss here could really start to minimize his options, including how much money he can get in the heavyweight division. The name recognition and the credit that you can get from Lucas Browne will diminish with every loss. It's kind of that Kevin Johnson thing. Sure, they might bring him over at late notice for a lot of up-and-coming prospects, but there's diminishing returns for a Kevin Johnson win in this day and age in 2020. And it will be the same for Lucas Browne. He's trading on the record, only the 2 losses, but he is 40 years old, and he has been stopped by Dillian Whyte brutally. Dave Allen with a body shot, that was almost a year ago now. He hasn't looked good for a couple of years now, so where does he really go if he loses? But I guess for him, this fight going ahead, a replacement found, that is good for him in terms of he doesn't have a wasted camp. You know, obviously the cost involved with preparing for a fight, and this was going to be probably a halfway decent payday for him. I'm sure he's glad it's going ahead, but he's a puncher's chance, but I don't give him anything more than that, really. I think even though Apti Davtaev is a better style matchup for him, I think at some point the Russian, who is open to being hit himself, I think he is going to land some power punches, the right hand in particular, and it could be good night for Lucas Browne. And if it is an early night for Davtaev, he looks impressive, Dimitri Salita is right. It will announce himself to the heavyweight division. Maybe not the biggest statement in the world, but a statement of sorts. But what do you make of this replacement opponent? Apti Davtaev, unbeaten Russian, facing Lucas Browne March 28th. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.